The 2018 governor's race will begin in earnest in 2017. Some names being lobbied about right now include George Brauchler and Walker Stapleton on the Republican side, and Democrats Cary Kennedy and Ken Salazar. David, since Ken Salazar is not going to be headed to D.C. anytime soon, we thought that if the election went differently, he would be busier with different duties in 2017. Do you think he is the presumptive front runner at this point of the game?
He is the presumptive front runner, but that doesn't mean he's necessarily got the advantage in the long term. Back in the 94, I believe, Eric may correct me on this, Dick Lamb was running had been a very successful state representative and then a three-term governor, winning his third term in an enormous landslide where even his opponent said, you know, he's actually a good governor, and Lamb reciprocated the compliment that he would be a good governor. So Lamb was the king of Colorado politics. But then he leaves office, and he was kind of out of it for several years, and then he comes back and runs in the Democratic Senate primary. And, you know, thought everybody would know him and like him and he'd be famous, but, you know, all these immigrants come into the state and other people have shorter memories, and so all of his successes of the 70s and 80s didn't do him much good politically in the 90s, and he ended up losing the primary to Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who was a U.S. representative, but only known in one part of the state before the thing began. So I don't think Ken Salazar certainly shouldn't be complacent if he, thinks that he can just have the nomination for the asking.
Eric, let's take a look on the Republican side of things. You have George Brauchler headed into presumably another death penalty case, one that he got a guilty plea out of the Aurora case, but then did not get the death penalty. Is that going to play into his potential gubernatorial plans later this year?
I think it will. First of all, David is a master at trivia and always is coming up with stuff that we don't know about, so it's not often I get to correct him. I will do so here. It was 1992 as opposed to 94. Some internal satisfaction there.
Facial on me.
I think both parties are going to have vigorous primaries for governor. These nominations are not going to be easily handed out. People are going to have to earn them. I think the Republican field likely will be smaller than the Democratic field. The big names are Walker Stapleton, state treasurer, George Brauchler, Arapahoe County district attorney, up-and-comer, probably closer to some, not on the hard right, but further right than Stapleton, who's a more establishment kind of guy. I think Americans for Prosperity and some elements around them are gravitating more to Brauchler. You have Steve House, who is the chairman of the Republican Party. I'm not sure I see that yet, but he is making noises about throwing his hat in the ring. You hear Cynthia Kaufman's name. I'm not a believer about that, but we will see. What the coming year is going to do, Dominic, it's not going to decide the governor's race. It's just going to set the stage. That's what 2017 is about. Democratic side, I think you have the makings of really a historic primary here for the level of talent that is putting itself out there. Ken Salazar would clearly be the front runner, but I push back, as David did, on the notion that he would be presumptive. I think there's also a generational issue happening within the Democratic Party. Cary Kennedy is a very attractive candidate. Let's not forget State Senator Mike Johnston, term limited, very attractive candidate, very compelling out on the stump. Noel Ginsburg is a philanthropist around town, civic leader, successful business person who is seriously looking at it. And the Bernie Sanders wing of this party will be heard from. There are two names being circulated there. One is Joe Salazar from Adams County. One is Mike Merrifield, famously for saying that anybody who believes in charter schools has a special place in hell. Merrifield is looking at this race as well. I'm not a believer that he's going very far, but this will be a wild ride in both parties.
Penn, Democrats in Colorado have usually done a very good job at not hurting themselves in a bruising primary. They get together, have a meeting, one person gets to go. They did it when Ken Salazar ran for Senate. They've done it over the years and many times. Do you think they will have another coming of the minds probably late in 2017, or are we in for a bruising primary with, as Eric mentioned, some pretty heavy hitters in the Democratic Party?
I don't think there'll be a meeting of the minds. I think we're going to see a bruising primary on both sides of the aisle. Do not underestimate for a minute the ambitions in the General Assembly. When I first got elected, I remember lobbyists telling me the thing they hated about Election Day is 100 legislators woke up in the mirror and saw the next president of the United States. So you will see grandstanding on a huge scale this legislative session. And you need to, because if you really want to position yourself to run, 2017 session is the session you have to do it, because 2018 you need to start looking gubernatorial. So you need to do some things to stand out and get your name out there. I think we're going to see a number of people on both sides of the aisle begin to posture, position, try to grandstand a little bit, bring attention to themselves to see if they can get some buzz generated. People saying, gee whiz, you're better than this person. You really ought to think about being governor. And so it begins, which also portends the General Assembly may not get a whole lot done this session also. But no, I don't think anybody's a shoo-in. I don't think anybody's the presumptive nominee of anything. I think it's wide open. And I think this election cycle sort of set it in motion because of the Trump element and the Sanders element in play here.
Patty, there's some potential first, at least on the Democratic side of the aisle. We could have at least a candidate, our first Latino governor in Ken Salazar, our first woman as governor in Cary Kennedy. Do you see any of them carrying the day, or at least in a prime front-runner position by the time we are talking about this next year?
Well, I think Ken Salazar needs to decide soon and announce soon if he's going to run, because first of all, everybody's exhausted right now. The Democrats are exhausted. It would be really nice for them to be able to say, we've got time to rebuild and kind of set things in motion before we have that bruising fight. Ken Salazar was working on Hillary Clinton's transition for a long time. A lot of people thought they were going to Washington. It's really thrown the party here in upheaval. And apparently Trump does think Colorado's rigged enough that he hasn't lured anyone from this state yet to be part of his cabinet. So I do think Ken Salazar is in a good position if he wants to run, but he's got to decide soon. Remember when Ritter was running, there was some move to have people go against him, but even Hickenlooper backed off then. You know, people do sometimes think it's their turn, especially if they can win, and I think Ken Salazar could win here.